The Cherry Blossom Murders. Episode 2, Will's First Night at the Cherry Blossoms Host Bar. An original sleep story, narrated in the author's own voice. I love to receive comments, so please get in touch to learn more about me. Welcome back. Tonight, we return to Japan in the late 1990s, to Tokyo in springtime, to a city of railway lines and temple bells, of illuminated signs and narrow side streets, of bicycles resting against low walls, of convenience stores open through the night, of vending machines glowing quietly beneath tangled telephone wires, and of cherry blossom petals carried gently through the evening air. Welcome back to the Cherry Blossom Murders, an original sleep story about love, mystery and self-growth in 1990s Japan. In episode 1, we met Will, a rather shy young Englishman living alone in a tiny Tokyo bedsit. Will had travelled to Japan hoping that life abroad might transform him, but his language school had suddenly closed, his money was running low, and Steve, the quiet and serious young man Will had secretly fallen for, had disappeared from his life without even saying goodbye. Then, Will's friend Chris made an unexpected suggestion. Perhaps Will did not need another predictable teaching job. Perhaps he needed something stranger, something more interesting. Something that might draw him deeper into the hidden life of the city. And so, guided through the busy streets of Shinjuku by his flamboyant friend Kim, Will descended a short flight of steps beneath an ordinary Tokyo street. There, beneath the pink neon sign, he discovered the Cherry Blossoms, a faded basement host bar filled with mirrors, cracked red leather booths and the melancholy glamour of another decade. He met Mama-san, formidable, glittering, almost impossible to read, and he met Daddy, her tiny fluffy dog, who appeared to regard Will's arrival as a matter of grave concern. Will signed a contract. He agreed to return the following evening, and somewhere, tucked inside Mama-san's handbag, he glimpsed an old photograph. Mama-san, a small boy, and Daddy, still a puppy, a private image from another time, a clue to a life Will could not yet begin to understand. Tonight, Will returns to the Cherry Blossoms for his first shift. But before he reaches the bar, he will pause at a quiet temple. There, unexpectedly, he will see Steve again. The young man he has tried not to think about, and of course has thought about constantly. Will discover that the bar is not quite the place he imagined. He will meet his first customer. He will hear a mysterious voice on the telephone. And somewhere behind the beaded curtain, the first shadow of the mystery will begin to appear. But for now, there is only Tokyo, only evening, only the distant sound of trains moving through the city. So settle comfortably beneath your blankets. Before you settle in, please like and subscribe if you are enjoying the story. There is much more to come. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I love to chat. Now, allow your breathing to become slow and easy. Let your muscles soften and breathe out slowly. Let the day begin to soften around you. And as the lights of Shinjuku begin to glow, we will return once more to the quiet, curious and unexpected world of the cherry blossoms. The following afternoon, I woke from a shallow sleep and, for a few confused moments, thought I should get ready for teaching. My room was dim. Clouds had gathered above the city, turning the light beyond the window pale and silvery. Somewhere outside, A train passed with a soft metallic rhythm. A bicycle bell rang in the street below. From the neighbouring apartment came the faint sound of a television programme and the smell of rice cooking. I remained still beneath the blanket. Then memory returned. The cherry blossoms, the pink neon sign, the narrow staircase, the mirrors, the cracked red leather booths, Mama-san's raised eyebrow, Daddy's suspicious little face, the champagne, and of course, the contract. I had signed it. There was no denying that. My name was written in careful English letters at the bottom of a document I had barely understood. It was possible. I reflected that this was not the most sensible way to start a new job, but sensible methods had brought me to unemployment. Perhaps, I knew it was time to try something else. I turned my head and looked around the room. Chris was no longer there. This was not unusual. Chris had a way of disappearing from rooms and reappearing several hours later with a story that began casually and became less credible with every sentence. On the low table beside the futon, he had left a note. It was written in purple ink on the back of an old receipt. It said, "Will dearest, gone in search of spiritual enlightenment and possibly lunch. Do try not to be murdered on your first evening. It creates a bad impression. Love from C." I read the final line twice, then. I folded the note carefully and placed it beside my wallet. It seemed an unfortunate choice of words. Outside, another train moved through the neighbourhood. The sound faded gradually into the city. I sat upright and looked towards the small mirror beside the window. I looked uncertain. This was not unusual. I had spent most of my life looking uncertain in mirrors. At 22, I still possessed the slightly unfinished appearance of someone waiting to become himself. My hair was short and mousy blonde. My face was pale and my expression was thoughtful in a way I preferred to describe as sensitive, and Chris preferred to describe as approaching tragic. I brushed my hair, then I changed my shirt, and then I changed it again. Mama-san had told me to wear something smaller, something that showed what she called my, nice English body. This description seemed generous. After some hesitation, I chose a black vest beneath my pea coat and a pair of narrow jeans. I stood before the mirror. The vest made me feel exposed. The coat made me feel more respectable. Together, the effect was tolerable, not confident, not glamorous, but perhaps almost employable. I made tea. There was no proper English tea left, only a small packet of Japanese tea bags purchased from the convenience store. The flavour was lighter, softer, not entirely what I wanted, but warm enough to hold between my hands. The kettle clicked off. Steam rose gently towards the ceiling. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine that the evening might go well. I would sit beside a customer. I would ask about his work. I would listen carefully. I would smile. Perhaps I would laugh when appropriate. Perhaps I would even discover that I possessed some previously unsuspected talent for making strangers feel at ease. It was possible. People discovered surprising things about themselves. That was one of the reasons I had come to Japan, to become someone slightly braver, someone less inclined to remain hidden inside his own thoughts. Someone Steve might have noticed. I closed my eyes. There it was again. Steve. The quiet thought that returned whenever my mind became still. I wondered where he was, whether he had found another job, whether he had left Tokyo, whether he ever thought of me. The lost possibility seemed unlikely, but I held it gently for a moment before allowing it to fade. Then I finished my tea, put on my coat, locked the apartment door, and began walking towards the station. The streets were damp from an earlier shower. The pavement reflected the grey sky. A woman in a cream raincoat cycled past carrying groceries in a wire basket. A delivery driver arranged crates outside the convenience store. 2 schoolchildren walked beneath matching yellow umbrellas, speaking quietly to one another. At the corner, the little electronic bell above the convenience store door chimed whenever someone entered or left. I paused outside. Then I went in and bought an umeboshi rice ball. I had begun to think of the sour pickle plum as a kind of private ritual, a small taste of uncertainty, sharp at first, then familiar. The cashier placed the rice ball inside a tiny plastic bag and thanked me with perfect brightness. I bowed. The automatic doors slid open. Cool shop air gave way to the soft dampness of the street. I ate slowly as I walked. The city around me appeared composed from small details. A row of umbrellas drying outside a shop, a stone fox beside a shrine, a cat curled beneath a bicycle, the glowing buttons of a vending machine. The soft chime of a railway crossing. Tokyo was enormous, but it also rewarded attention. It asked you to notice small things. Perhaps that was why I'd begun to love it, even when I felt lost, especially when I felt lost. Before I went to the station, I paused at the corner and took out the folded map I had picked up some days earlier. It was already beginning to tear along the creases. The paper was soft from being opened and closed too often. I searched for the small symbol that meant shrine or temple. There was one not far away, a little beyond the streets I knew. Not far enough to be adventurous in any real sense, but far enough to feel like a small act of courage. I had time before my shift. Too much time perhaps, and enough time to worry, enough time to imagine humiliations yet to come, enough time to picture myself sitting beside a customer in complete silence while he wondered why anyone had employed me at all. This seemed unhelpful. A temple, I decided, might steady me, or at least give me somewhere dignified to be nervous. So I turned away from the station and walked through quieter streets. The evening light rested softly on the tiled roofs. A delivery scooter hummed past. Somewhere, a radio played. The city seemed to fold itself into smaller and smaller details. A row of potted plants, a blue Norin curtain lifting in the breeze, a bicycle leaning against a wall, a narrow drainage channel carrying rainwater quietly towards the road. After 10 minutes, the temple appeared between ordinary buildings. It was not famous. No coach parties waited outside. No guidebook had described it as essential. This made me like it immediately. It had a small wooden gate, dark roof tiles, a stone basin, and a courtyard scattered with damp leaves. A thread of incense smoke drifted through the air. The scent was gentle. Sandalwood, ash, rain on old wood. I washed my hands at the basin, copying what I had seen other people do. Not perfectly, but respectfully. I lit a thin stick of incense and placed it carefully among the others. The smoke rose in a pale line, then loosened into the air. For a few moments, I stood before the little shrine. It was open on one side, like a small room offered to the weather. The wooden beams were dark and smooth. The hanging rope moved slightly in the breeze. Somewhere nearby, a bell gave a soft, almost accidental sound. I bowed my head. I did not know what I believed. Not exactly, but I knew what I wanted. I wanted the evening to go well. I wanted not to embarrass myself. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to become someone slightly less frightened by ordinary life. And because I was too weak not to, I wanted Steve to think well of me. I opened my eyes. The courtyard was quiet. A few wooden votive plaques hung from a rack near the side of the shrine. They moved gently in the breeze, knocking together with a soft, dry sound. Some were written in careful Japanese characters. Some had little drawings. One showed a fox. Another showed a pair of doves. Wishes, I supposed. Hopes made visible. The sort of thing one should never read too closely in case one accidentally glimpsed another person's whole heart. I moved nearer. The plaques clicked softly. For a moment, I felt almost calm. Then I saw him. Steve was standing across the courtyard. At first, I thought I had imagined him. This was not impossible. I had imagined Steve in so many places that his sudden appearance in an actual one seemed almost bad manners. But it was him. He wore a pale shirt beneath a dark jacket. His hair had fallen slightly forward. His posture was straight, almost formal. He stood before the shrine with his head bowed. I should have looked away. A sensible person would have looked away. A mature person would have respected his privacy and gone about his evening with grace and quiet self-command. Naturally, I watched him, not for long, at least, I hoped not for long. Time behaves very badly around desire. A few seconds can feel like an afternoon. An afternoon can vanish in the time it takes someone to turn his head. Steve lifted his face, then he turned and looked straight at me. The air seemed to tighten. I looked immediately at the votive plaques. With great intensity, as though I had travelled across Tokyo for the sole purpose of studying small wooden boards I could not read. My face felt hot. I could hear my own breathing. Behind me, the city continued faintly. A scooter, a train in the distance. The soft mechanical warning of a crossing bell. Footsteps approached across the stones. I knew they were his before he spoke. "Will?" Steve said. I turned with a smile that arrived too quickly and therefore could not possibly have looked natural. "Steve," I replied. "Hello, what a surprise." He glanced around the courtyard. "Yes," he said. It was not clear whether he meant that it was a surprise or that he was surprised I had chosen to announce the obvious like a weather report. We stood for a moment in silence. The votive plaques moved gently beside us. "Are you visiting?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I thought I would see a temple before work." "This is a shrine," he said. "Is it?" I replied. "Shinto," Steve added. "Ah," I said, with an air of thoughtful understanding. There was another silence. One day, I hoped, I might meet Steve and not immediately crumble. Steve looked at the plaques. "Were you reading the wishes?" "Trying to," I said. He looked at me. "Can you read them?" "Not especially," I admitted. A hint of amusement touched his face. "Not much, but enough." "Some are prayers for exams," he said, looking at the wooden plaques. "Some for health, some for love, some for a safe birth. That one is asking for success in business." "Useful," I said, thinking of the cherry blossoms. He turned to me more fully. "You have a new job?" The question startled me. Of course he knew the school had closed, but I had not expected him to ask. I had not expected him to wonder anything about me at all. Yes, I said. Teaching? Not exactly. Steve waited. I felt the whole evening tilt slightly. I did not want to lie to him. I also did not want to say I am about to begin work in a gay host bar beneath Shinjuku, wearing a black vest chosen by a man who thinks fear is my brand. Even by my standards, this seemed a lot for a shrine courtyard. Hospitality, I said at last. Hospitality? In a manner of speaking, Steve studied me. There was something guarded in his expression. Concern, perhaps, or disapproval, or only the usual difficulty of reading another person and then inventing the most painful interpretation because my mind will find the worst case scenario in anything. I hope it goes well, he said quietly. The simplicity of it caught me. Thank you, I replied. A train passed somewhere beyond the temple walls. The sound rose, filled the pause between us, then faded. Neither of us spoke while it passed. I wondered whether he would leave when the sound ended. I wondered whether I should say something brave, something light, something that suggested I was a normal young man in possession of both dignity and a social life. Instead, I said, "And you?" "Me? Have you found work?" "Not yet," he replied. "A few possibilities." "Good," I said. "Perhaps." He looked away towards the shrine. For a moment, he seemed not distant exactly, but tired. Less severe than I remembered from school. More human. This should not have surprised me. But when one has turned a person into an object of longing, their humanity arrives almost as an inconvenience. A beautiful inconvenience, admittedly. But still. "I should go," he said. "Of course," I replied too quickly. He gave a small nod. Then, after a hesitation, he said, "It was nice to see you, Will." The words were ordinary, almost nothing, but they moved through me with force. "It was nice to see you too," I said. He smiled then, only slightly, only for a second, but it was enough to make the whole courtyard seem changed. He turned and walked towards the gate. I watched him go. This time I tried not to look as though I was watching. At the gate, he paused once, not fully, only enough to suggest he might have thought of turning back. Then, he stepped into the street and was gone. For some time, I remained in the courtyard. The incense had burned lower. The smoke drifted sideways now. The wooden plaques moved softly in the breeze. At last, I bought one from the little stall beside the shrine. I held the pen for longer than necessary. I thought about writing Steve's name. Then, felt immediately ashamed of myself. A wish should not be a trap set for another person. Even I knew that. So I wrote, "To be myself the best I can, and to help others." The words were simple, possibly childish, but they felt true. I hung the plaque among the others. It knocked gently against a prayer for exams and another for love. That seemed appropriate. Most lives, I suspected, were some combination of both. Then I bowed once more. The evening was drawing on. The sky had darkened slightly above the roofs. The street lamps were beginning to glow. The cherry blossoms would be opening soon. I left the shrine and walked towards the station. The city felt different now, not easier, Not exactly, but more connected, as if Steve's brief appearance had tied the day behind me to the evening ahead, the old life to the new one, the school to the bar, the person I had been to the person I might yet become. At the station, I joined the flow of commuters travelling home while I was travelling to work. The platform was crowded but calm. Everyone appeared to know where to stand, where to look, how to arrange their bodies so that the train could absorb them efficiently. I remained less accomplished. When the doors opened, I was carried inside with everyone else. The carriage smelled faintly of damp coats and warm metal. A businessman slept with one hand looped through a hanging strap. A student read a manga. An elderly woman held a paper-wrapped parcel carefully in her lap. Beyond the window, Tokyo slipped past in fragments, balconies, rooftops, telephone wires, laundry moving slightly in the evening air. Rows of small houses compressed between taller buildings, then tunnels, reflections, stations, people entering and leaving. The train moved onward. I tried to rehearse what I would say when I arrived. Good evening, Mama-san. Thank you for employing me. I hope I shall prove satisfactory. The words sounded like something written in a letter from another century. Perhaps that suited the cherry blossoms. The bar seemed to exist outside ordinary time. Beneath its mirrored ceiling and pink neon sign, several decades had collected without quite agreeing to leave. The train reached Shinjuku. I stepped onto the platform. The station absorbed me immediately. Corridors, ticket gates, staircases, signs, the tide of other people. Announcements echoed from somewhere overhead. I followed the arrows carefully. Then I emerged into the evening. Shinjuku had changed since the morning. The city was brighter now. Shop signs flickered into life above the streets. Music spilled from electronic stores. Taxis moved slowly through the traffic. Office windows glowed high above the pavement. The rain had stopped, but the road still shone with reflected light. I stood still for a moment. The whole district appeared doubled. One city above, another beneath it. A second Tokyo, made of colour and shadow, floating across the wet pavement. I walked towards the side streets, past the coffee shop, past the vending machines, past the tiny brown temple wedged between grey buildings. A thread of incense smoke drifted into the evening air. The temple bell rang once, then softly again, across the road. The steps descended towards the cherry blossoms. The pink sign glowed above the metal door. In daylight it had looked faintly camp. In the evening it looked more convincing. Not glamorous exactly, but inviting in a secretive way. A hidden room beneath an ordinary city. I paused at the top of the stairs. Then I remembered Chris's note. Do try not to be murdered on your first evening. I smiled, despite myself, and descended. The bar was silent when I entered. For a moment, I wondered whether I had arrived too early. The mirrors reflected only the low lamps. The cracked red leather booths sat empty. The long bar gleamed faintly beneath the dim light. A glass cat raised and lowered one paw in a slow, mechanical greeting. Behind the counter, a red electronic clock displayed a time slightly different from the brass clock on the opposite wall. Time seemed to elongate. The room carried the stillness of a theatre before an audience arrives, or perhaps a church. Or, less reassuringly, a waiting room. I removed my pea coat and folded it carefully over the back of a chair. The black vest beneath it appeared even smaller in the bar's mirrored reflections. One will would have been enough. The mirrors produced several. I coughed quietly. No one appeared. "Mama-san?" I called. My voice seemed too loud. The beaded curtain at the far side of the room did not move. I approached the bar. A drinks menu rested beside the glass cat. It was printed on thick cream card and covered with elaborate names. Some were in Japanese. Others appeared to have been translated into English with some imagination. There was a cocktail called the Midnight Salaryman, another called the Naughty Husband, a third called the Sweet Secretary. The prices were extraordinary. I looked again to make certain I had understood them correctly. A convenience store across the street sold drinks for a fraction of the cost, but of course, customers at the Cherry Blossoms were not simply paying for drinks. They were paying for the time, the mirrors, the lights, the conversation, the sense that for an hour or two someone might be pleased to see them. On the second page, a folded piece of silver paper slipped from the menu and landed on the floor. I bent down and picked it up. It had been folded carefully into a tiny square. I turned it over in my fingers. It did not seem like ordinary rubbish. I knew nothing about drugs. My education had been respectable in the least useful sense. Still, even I suspected that the silver wrapper had not once contained a mint. I returned it carefully to the menu. Then I stepped away from the bar. On the wall behind me hung a board listing the evening's special drinks. At the top, written in curling pink letters, were the words, "The Nymphomaniac's Prayer." I read the name silently, then again aloud. The Nymphomaniac's Prayer. "That is a drink of unusual power." Mama-san's voice came from the darkness. At the far side of the room, I jumped. She stepped forward slowly. Tonight, her hair was partly concealed beneath an electric blue turban. Matching fingerless gloves covered her hands. Her shiny black jumpsuit caught the light whenever she moved. Gold jewellery flashed at her wrists. Her face was carefully made up. The white foundation softened some features and sharpened others. Beneath it, I noticed the faint unevenness of her skin. It made her appear older at first glance, but perhaps she was younger than I had imagined. Perhaps there were many things about Mama-san that could not be understood at first glance. She walked towards me. Her bracelets clicked softly. "You early," she said. I thought it better to arrive in good time, I suggested. Mama-san looked at the clock, then at the other clock, then back at me. "Maybe early," she said. I smiled uncertainly. Mama-san pointed towards my coat. "Take off." "I have." She looked at my vest and raised an eyebrow. For a moment she said nothing. Then she nodded once. "Better. Thank you." Still too English. "I think that may be difficult to change," I said uncertainly. Mama-san raised the opposite eyebrow. I fell silent. She guided me towards a booth. The leather creaked, and as I sat, Mama-san remained standing. "The customer wants attention," she said. "Yes. Lovely attention," she went on. "Yes. Praise. I see." "You ask about work. Work always hard," she said. "Of course." "You ask about wife, but not too much wife." "That seems sensible." You ask about children, but not too much children. I understand. You ask about golf. Even if I know nothing about golf? I asked. Especially then, customer-like explain. Mama-san looked at me seriously. You listen, you smile. You make customer feel lovely and important. I nodded. This seemed manageable. Perhaps even meaningful. Everyone wanted to feel important. Everyone wanted to be listened to, even if the listening took place beneath a neon sign in a mirrored basement and the drinks cost far too much. I thought again of Steve. The way I had listened whenever he spoke, the careful attention I had given to every small detail, a favourite book, a passing remark, the tilt of his head when he smiled. Perhaps I had always possessed the instincts of a host. I had simply lavished them on someone who had not asked for them. Mama-san watched me. "You're thinking too much," she said in a half-amused way. "Bad for business." I will try to think less. That seemed right. Thinking less and doing more. Good. She turned away. Then, as she reached the beaded curtain, she looked back. No touching. I blinked. Well, I was going to ask about that. No touching, Mama-san repeated. Good, I agreed. She disappeared through the curtain. The beads clicked together softly behind her. A moment later, her head reappeared between them. "Unless customer very nice," she snapped. Then, the curtain fell closed again. I looked towards the glass cat on the bar. Its paw continued to rise and fall. I had the impression that it understood more than I did. I returned to the drinks menu. The nymphomaniac's prayer appeared to contain several spirits and one ingredient translated only as special sweetness. This did not really clarify matters. I tried to memorize the prices. Then the telephone rang. The sound cut sharply through the quiet room. I glanced towards it. The telephone stood behind the bar. Black, heavy, slightly old-fashioned. It rang again. I waited. No one appeared. The phone rang for a third time. Now that I was officially employed, it seemed natural that I should answer it, possibly even responsible. I walked behind the bar and lifted the receiver. "Moshi Moshi," I said. There was a pause. Then a man spoke, rapidly in Japanese. "I am sorry," I said. "My Japanese is not very good." The man continued. Then he switched to English. "Kim?" "No," I replied. "This is Will." Another pause. "Kim? Kim is not here at the moment." The man seemed not to hear me. "Do you have the papers?" he asked. I hesitated. Well, there were papers. Mama-san had placed my contract inside her handbag. Perhaps he meant those. "Yes," I said cautiously. "Has he signed them?" I thought of my signature, the careful English letters. "Yes," I said. The man became quiet for a moment. I heard only the faint crackle of the line. Then he said, "Good luck." His voice changed slightly, softer, closer, more unsettling. He added something else in a low voice, an intimate remark about underwear that seemed entirely unrelated to the conversation. Then the line went dead. I remained standing behind the bar with the receiver pressed against my ear. The silence that followed seemed unusually complete. Slowly, I replaced the phone. "What a strange man," I whispered. "Who's a strange man, darling?" Kim appeared. Through the beaded curtain, he wore a fitted silver t-shirt and a pair of narrow black shorts. His dyed blonde hair was carefully arranged. His arms looked impressively rounded beneath the light. He appeared entirely at home, not simply dressed for the cherry blossoms completed by it. Someone telephoned, I said. For me? Kim asked. I think so. What did he want? He asked about papers, I replied shyly. Kim's expression altered, only slightly. A brief pause, a moment of stillness, then the brightness returned. What papers? He asked, too calmly, looking away. I assumed he meant my contract. Kim smiled. Probably, he said with an air of bringing the conversation to a close. He seemed very interested in whether they had been signed, I offered. People are interested in the strangest things, he said with a dismissive gesture, still looking away. He also said something rather personal. Ooh. Kim laughed, breaking the strange, mounting tension. Then he definitely knows me, he quipped, smiling at last. I looked at him blankly, then smiled. There was a pause, and then the metal door opened. A middle-aged Japanese businessman entered the bar. He wore a dark suit. His tie was carefully knotted. His umbrella remained folded neatly beneath one arm. He paused at the entrance. With the cautious expression of someone arriving at a place he knew well and preferred not to be seen entering. Kim turned towards him. Immediately, his whole manner changed, softened, brightened, expanded. Yurakami-san, Kim called warmly. The man smiled. Kim crossed the room, took his umbrella and guided him towards a booth. Then he looked back at me. There, Kim said, looking at me for the first time in some minutes. Your first customer. I stared at him. My first customer, I asked, wide-eyed. Mr. Yurakami. Now, I stammered. No time like the present, he said with a smile. There are many times like the present, I said, some of them tomorrow. Kim ignored this. He inspected my vest, then my arms, then my expression. You look frightened. I am frightened. Excellent, very appealing, Kim asserted. Fear doesn't seem very appealing to me, I replied. Will, doll, fear is practically your brand, Kim went on, taking my shoulders and turning me towards the bar. Before you sit down, do a few press-ups. I looked at him. Here? I asked. Behind the bar? He said, pointing towards it. Why? Your chest needs encouragement, he said with a smile. My chest? I asked. I can't do press-ups here. Now. Kim folded his arms deep. A minute later, I was doing press-ups behind the bar. The carpet smelled faintly of old perfume and cleaning fluid. I completed several with increasingly poor form and wobbling arms. Kim watched in silence. Eventually, I stopped, or rather collapsed, and scrabbled to my feet. Kim considered me. We have a lot of work to do, he said, not unkindly, but we'll do it together. Thank you, I said, brushing myself down. He adjusted the neckline of my vest. Then he picked up a folded napkin from the counter. What are you doing? I asked. Improving your silhouette. I don't think I want my silhouette improved. No one ever does until they see the results. With astonishing efficiency. Kim tucked the folded napkin into my underwear. I stepped backwards in alarm. Kim! I exclaimed in shock. Think big, he said. Smile sweetly. I would rather rely on conversation. Conversation is important, Kim agreed, but one should never neglect supporting materials. Mr. Urakami looked towards us. I attempted to compose myself. Kim patted my shoulder. Compliment him. Ask about work. Nod. Smile. Laugh whenever possible. What if I don't understand him? I asked, growing anxious. Smile more, Kim suggested. What if he asks a question? Nod first, then smile, then laugh. This seems a bit, dishonest, I muttered. It's hospitality, doll, Kim said. You're not on trial. Yet. Then Kim pushed me, gently towards the booth. Mr. Urakami stood. As I approached, he bowed. I bowed too. Then he bowed again. I bowed again. For several moments we appeared to be trapped in a cycle of increasing politeness. Eventually, we sat. Mr. Urakami smiled shyly. I smiled back. Neither of us spoke. The bar remained quiet around us. How was your day? I asked. Mr. Urakami considered this. Very hard, he replied. I remembered Mama-san's instructions. Oh dear, I said sympathetically. Work must be very difficult. Mr. Urakami nodded. Yes, he said, very difficult. What kind of work do you do? Mr. Urakami explained. I understood, perhaps, 1 word in 5. There appeared to be something involving an office, a manager, numbers, a train journey, and an angry colleague. I listened carefully. Where appropriate, I nodded. Where appropriate, I smiled. Occasionally, I said, that sounds very demanding. Or, you must work extremely hard. Or, I can understand why that would be tiring. To my surprise, Mr. Urakami appeared pleased. His shoulders softened. His smile grew warmer. The language barrier mattered less than I had expected. Perhaps many conversations required fewer words than people imagined. Attention had a language all of its own, kindness too. After a while, I asked, what is your favourite sport? This was my stock in trade at the language school. I came to realise I could use the questions I asked at school. Baseball, Mr. Urakami replied immediately. This seemed promising. I knew very little about baseball, but I knew that it involved a bat, a ball, and a reassuring number of opportunities for further questions. Do you go to games? I asked. Mr. Urakami brightened. He began to speak with enthusiasm. Teams, players, a stadium, a game attended many years earlier with his father. I could not follow every detail, but I recognized the emotion, the pleasure of remembering something connected to childhood, a place, a person, a moment safely preserved. As he spoke, I thought of the photograph in Mama-san's handbag, the little boy, the ribbon, Daddy as a puppy, objects carried through time, small images that held entire stories inside them. The metal door opened again, then again. More customers began to arrive, men in suits, men carrying umbrellas, men with tired faces gradually softened by the low light. They entered quietly, cautiously, one at a time. Each was welcomed, each was guided towards a booth, each seemed to leave part of the outside world behind at the door. Kim moved easily amongst them. He greeted one customer with a delighted laugh, another with a confidential whisper, a third with a hand placed lightly against his elbow. Other hosts appeared from behind the beaded curtain. 3 or 4 young men in fitted t-shirts and carefully styled hair. They seemed confident, relaxed, entirely certain of how to occupy the room. I envied them, but as Mr. Yurakami continued, speaking about baseball, I noticed that I no longer felt quite so frightened. I had survived the first few minutes, then the next few. Perhaps that was how courage worked, not as a dramatic transformation, not as the sudden arrival of certainty, but as the quiet discovery that one could remain present for another minute. Then another, then another. Still, Mr. Yurakami smiled at me. "You listen very good," he said. "Thank you. You kind." The words touched me more than I expected. I looked down at my hands. Perhaps I had wanted someone to say that for a long time. Not that I was clever, and not that I was attractive, not that I might become more impressive if I tried harder. Simply that I was kind. I looked up again. "Would you like another drink?" I asked. Mr. Yurakami nodded, and for the first time that evening I smiled without having to remember to do so. The bar gradually changed around us. It filled with conversation, with the soft clink of glasses, with laughter, with music playing quietly through speakers hidden somewhere above the mirrors. The low lamps cast warm circles of light across the tables. Reflections multiplied the movement. The room no longer seemed empty or faded. It came alive, in layers, a gesture caught in a mirror. A champagne bottle lifted at the bar. A customer leaning closer to hear a story. The sweep of the beaded curtain. Daddy trotting between the booths with the grave confidence of a tiny manager inspecting his premises. Whenever he passed me, he paused, looked at me, then continued. I had not yet earned his trust, but perhaps I had been granted a temporary stay of judgment. Mr. Yurakami ordered another drink, then another. With each one he became slightly more animated. He asked me about England, about my family, about football, about the weather, about whether English people genuinely drank tea throughout the day. "Yes," I said, "whenever possible. Even in the summer, especially summer." Mr. Yurakami considered this, then nodded respectfully. I asked whether he had ever visited England. He had not. But he had seen photographs of London. Big Ben, red buses, the Buckingham Palace, a foggy street that might have been photographed at any point in the previous century. I told him about rain, terraced houses, Sunday roasts, tea shops, parks, the soft greyness of English afternoons. As I spoke, I realised that I missed home, not enough to return. Not yet, but enough to feel its shape inside me. Tokyo was bright, restless, immense. England in memory had become smaller, softer, a place of familiar rooms and predictable weather. A place I might one day appreciate more because I had left it. The music changed and a hush moved through the room. Not silence exactly, more a shift in attention. Conversation softened. Several customers turned towards a small raised platform beside the bar. A spotlight flickered on. Then Mama-san appeared. Her electric blue turban remained in place, catching the light from the small raised platform beside the bar. She wore a glittering shawl over her black jumpsuit. One hand held a microphone. The other reached dramatically towards the shadows. Kim stepped forward. He had changed into a sequined vest. The light caught every movement, and the customers applauded. Kim bowed. Mama-san lifted the microphone. Music began. It was a traditional enka song, a kind of wistful ballad, one of those songs about love, regret, and the impossible difficulty of understanding another person before it is too late. Mama-san sang first. Her voice surprised me. It was warm, strong, slightly roughened at the edges, but full of feeling. Kim answered with a softer line. Then their voices joined. It should have been absurd. Perhaps it was absurd. The glittering shawl, the sequined vest, the mirrors, the cracked leather. The customers watching with grave attention beneath the low pink lights. And yet it was also moving. Something passed through Mama-san's expression as she sang, a sadness, a memory. What seemed to be a private grief momentarily made visible. I thought again of the photograph in her handbag, the little boy, the ribbon, the old fold lines across the image. Perhaps everyone at the Cherry Blossoms carried something hidden. A secret, a regret, a version of themselves, known only in glimpses and memories. One customer wiped his eyes. Another rested his chin thoughtfully against one hand. Mr. Urakami listened without speaking. When the song ended, the room filled with applause. Mama-san bowed. Kim blew kisses towards the booths. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the performance ended. Conversation returned. Glasses moved. The room breathed again. Mr. Urakami turned towards me. His expression was soft. Beautiful, he said. Yes, I replied, and I meant it. Kim returned to the booths, laughing brightly. He sat beside another customer and accepted a glass of champagne. His arms seemed incapable of remaining still. His smile filled the room. He belonged here. In a way, I could not imagine belonging anywhere. But perhaps belonging did not have to look the same for everyone. Kim belonged through brightness. Mama-san belonged through force of will. Mr. Urakami belonged quietly in the softened hour between work and home. And perhaps I might belong simply by listening. I looked towards the drinks board. The pink lettering caught my eye again. The nymphomaniac's prayer, a drink of unusual power. I considered the price, then looked at Mr. Urakami. A host was expected to encourage purchases. That was the business. I cleared my throat. Would you consider buying me a nymphomaniac's prayer? I asked shyly. Mr. Urakami blinked, sharply, then laughed, not loudly but warmly. You want? He asked. I am curious. Mr. Urakami nodded with dignified seriousness. So, yes, he said. I smiled. Thank you, I said solemnly with a bow. Mr. Urakami nodded, apparently satisfied. I stood. The room felt warmer now. The air carried perfume. Cigarette smoke and the sweetness of spilled alcohol. I made my way towards the bar. No one stood behind it. I searched for the ingredients. Bottles, glasses, a silver shaker, lemons, ice, a row of tiny dishes. Nothing appeared clearly labelled. I examined the drinks menu again. The nymphomaniac's prayer required brandy. At least, I thought it required brandy, damned. The handwriting was difficult to read. Perhaps the bottle would be stored elsewhere. I looked towards the beaded curtain. Behind it lay the darker part of the bar. The place Mama-san and Kim entered whenever they disappeared, presumably. The stock room, possibly. The kitchen. Perhaps simply another cupboard filled with bottles. I waited. No one appeared. Mr. Urakami watched from the booth. I did not want to seem helpless. Not on my first shift. Not after surviving the opening conversation. Not after persuading a customer to buy an extravagantly priced drink. I took a breath. Then I went through the beaded curtain. The room beyond was darker than I expected. For a moment, I could see almost nothing. The sounds of the bar softened behind me. Music, voices, laughter. The beads clicked together and the low light disappeared. I reached one hand towards the wall. My fingers found a switch. I pressed it. Nothing happened. The darkness remained. Hello? I called quietly. No one answered. I stepped forward. My shoe touched something soft. A folded cushion, perhaps, or a blanket. The room smelled different from the bar. Less of perfume, more of dust, fabric, and something faintly metallic. I waited for my eyes to adjust. Slowly, shapes emerged. A futon, a chair, a narrow table. Several bottles placed against one wall, a length of fabric hanging from a hook. The back room was not a stock room exactly, or not only a stock room. It seemed to serve several purposes, none of them entirely clear. I moved towards the bottles. Brandy, I whispered. The words sounded ridiculous in the dark. I reached out. My hand touched a bottle, then another. Neither label could be read in the shadows of the room. Behind me, the curtain moved slightly. A thin line of light entered from the bar. For a moment, I saw the room more clearly. The futon, the chair, the scattered cushions, a small table with 2 glasses. Then the beads fell back into place. Darkness returned. I heard a sound, a low sound, almost a sigh. I froze. "Hello?" I asked. Nothing. Perhaps it had come from the bar. Perhaps one of the customers had laughed. Perhaps the walls carried sound strangely. I reached again for the bottles. Then I heard it once more. A breath, a soft groan. Close enough now. That I knew it had come from inside the room. I remained still. My heart began to beat more quickly. Is someone there? No answer. The bar continued beyond the curtain. Warm, bright, full of conversation, only a few steps away. And yet the room felt entirely separate. A pocket of darkness folded behind the glittering surface of the cherry blossoms. I took one careful step forward, then another. My shoe brushed against something on the floor. I looked down. At first, I could not understand what I was seeing. Only the outline of a hand, still resting against the dark fabric of the futon. A man lay, partly concealed in the shadows. His face was turned away. For one hopeful moment, I thought he might be asleep, or drunk, or unwell, something ordinary, something explainable. "Excuse me," I whispered. The man did not move. I stepped backwards. My heel struck the low table. One of the glasses trembled. The sound seemed astonishingly loud. I reached for the curtain. Before I could touch it, someone entered the bar beyond. The beads shifted. Light spilled briefly into the room. In that single moment, I saw enough. Not everything, but enough. The stillness, the overturned glass, the dark stain across the floor, the pale hand resting beside the futon, the terrible absence of movement. I pushed through the curtain. The warm lights of the bar returned all at once. The mirrors, the booths, the customers, the music, the glasses, the voices. For several seconds, I could not speak. Kim noticed me, who stood and crossed the room. "What were you doing in there?" he asked. "I was looking for brandy." Kim looked toward the curtain, then back at me. "The brandy is behind the bar," I thought. My voice failed. I looked down. There was something on the toe of my brogue, a dark mark. At first, I thought it was spilled wine. Then the colour became clear beneath the light. Red, not bright, not theatrical, not something reflected from the neon sign, a real stain, a terrible one. I stopped breathing. Kim followed my gaze. His expression changed. The brightness left his face. For one suspended moment, neither of us moved around us. The cherry blossoms continued as though nothing had happened. A customer laughed. A glass touched the table. Daddy trotted beneath a chair. The music played softly through the hidden speakers. Then Mama-san appeared beside us. She looked down at my shoe. Her face became very still. No raised eyebrow, no theatrical grimace, no glittering performance, only silence. "What is it?" I asked. My voice sounded distant. Mama-san looked towards the beaded curtain. Kim took my arm. His fingers tightened. The room seemed to tilt slightly. The mirrors multiplied, the movement, the faces, the light, the reflections of reflections. Somewhere outside, beyond the basement steps, beyond the small brown temple, beyond the wet streets and glowing signs of Shinjuku, a train passed through the city. Its vibration reached us faintly. The glasses on the bar trembled. Then Daddy barked, once, sharp, certain, and the whole room seemed to wake. This has been episode 2 of the Cherry Blossom Murders, an original sleep story about love, mystery, and self-growth in 1990s Japan, narrated in the author's own voice. Thank you for listening. Tonight, Will paused at a quiet shrine before his first shift. There, he saw Steve again, not as a memory from the closed language school, but as someone still present in the city, someone who might yet matter more than Will dares to hope. Then, Will began his first shift at the Cherry Blossoms. He entered a hidden world beneath the streets of Shinjuku, a world of mirrors, faded glamour, quiet conversations, expensive drinks, and secrets concealed behind a beaded curtain. He met his first customer. He discovered that listening can sometimes be its own form of kindness. He saw another side of Mama-san, and he began, only briefly, to imagine that he might find a place for himself in Tokyo. But the Cherry Blossoms is not an ordinary bar. The mysterious telephone call, the signed papers, the silver wrapper hidden inside the menu, and the still figure lying in the darkness, all suggest that Will has stepped into a story far stranger than he understands. In episode 3, the police arrive at the Cherry Blossoms. Will begins to ask what really happened behind the beaded curtain. And as rain falls across the streets of Tokyo, he discovers that the mystery may already have drawn him closer than he ever intended. Before you drift away, please like and subscribe if you are enjoying the story, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I love to chat. But for now, allow the city to soften around you. Let the lights of Shinjuku become distant. Let the railway lines carry their passengers quietly into the night. Let the temple bell fade into the spring air, and let the pink neon sign above the cherry blossoms grow dim. Until then, rest well, and let the quiet lights of Tokyo fade gently into sleep.